Hello and welcome to another installment of our Buying for Beginners series with me, Max The Chieftain Hurley. And this time we're taking a look at the one faction that had no models produced by Games Workshop itself, but by Forge World, and one that everyone fantasizes about having, the Chaos Dwarfs. Like all our other Buying for Beginners videos, we'll be focusing on 3 competitive army lists and explaining the best value for money options for the units in each of those lists. So as I just mentioned, the Chaos Dwarfs were a range of figures that were solely produced by Forge World into the Games Workshop. And whilst that meant the figures that were produced were fantastic and absolutely gorgeous, they were incredibly expensive. This put a lot of people off buying them. And when the old world went poof, Forge World discontinued the range, unfortunately. So you rarely saw the models themselves ever. However, with the advent of 3D printing in the last few years, the Dawi Zharr have been given a new lease on life. And almost all of our models today will be coming from Lost Kingdom miniatures, with 1 or 2 that you can grab from GW. With that said, the prices from Lost Kingdom are for the STL files only, and they do not provide pre-printed models themselves. So you'll have to source a printer for yourself, although you can find plenty of sites like Etsy, etc. They will print the models for you. They're also in euros on their website, so if you decide to buy them, you're going to be subjected to the exchange rate of the day of purchase. So now on to the main event. I'm going to go through some competitive army lists and take you through exactly what you need to buy for each unit or character and give you the best cost I could find for each of them. The first list is going to be 1500 points, the second will be 2000, and the final one will be a Triple Crown Wargaming Event Standard 2500 point list. In each one, I'll try and keep as many of the units and characters the same so you can slowly build up your Chaos Dwarf force and not end up with units sitting in the case gathering dust by the end of it. Although I think all of us are guilty of having those units that we used to use and no longer do. So, the 1500 point list I've got with me today, I've got a Sorcerer Prophet, who's a level 4 on the Law of Metal, with a Dispel Scroll, an Enchanted Shield, and a Talisman of Endurance. Next is a Hobgoblin Khan with a Charm Shield, Spear, and Light Armour mounted upon a Giant Wolf. An Infernal Castellan, who is our Battle Standard Bearer, with the Mask of the Furnace, Warrior Bane, and a Shield. In core, we have 20 Infernal Guard with full command, Fireglaives, and Naptha bombs on the Death Mask. And in our special slot, we have 2 Deathshrieker rocket launchers and 2 Magma Cannons. So on to the characters first, then I'm going to start with a Sorcerer Prophet and Lost Kingdom Mega file called Kurin Disowned. Now he is on a scenic base, but with a little slicing and remodeling, he'll easily fit on a 20mm base with magic fire from his hands. The file for this guy is €6, so a nice and cheap price for him. Into the hero slot next, and we have the Hobgoblin Khan on his Giant Wolf. So in the past, people used to use Fenrisian Wolves from the 40k range and stick some Forest Goblin Spider Riders on top. But we're not going to do that for today. Lost Kingdom provides a unit called Step Riders on Dire Wolves that make the perfect Hobgoblin Khans. They do come with bows, unfortunately, but if you have any spare spears laying around, it would be a simple process of converting them up. Now, the file provides models, separate models for 5 of them, and I will spoil it a little bit here. We're going to use a few more later on, so having the 5 is a good thing. And the file for these 5 guys is €15. And our last hero is our Infernal Castellan BSB. Now again, the Lost Kingdom provides a model for us in the form of the Magma Battle Standard Bearer. Unfortunately, he is shirtless, but we're going to have to deal with it and move on unless you feel up to modelling or green stuffing some armour plating on his chest, which is not necessary, but you can do if you are comfortable enough to do that. The file for this guy is €5 as well. So moving on into our core, and the one only unit we have here right now is our Infernal Guard with Fireglaives. And we're going to use the Lost Kingdom's Death Guard with Arquebuses. This file contains only the rank and file troops, but there is a separate file for the command options as well, which you'll have to pay for separately, sadly. So for both the units and command, you are looking at €18 for the 2 put together. And then we're going to move into the special section and the first of our artillery, and we have the cheap as chips Deathshrieker rocket launcher. Lost Kingdom again has this covered in the form of the Mon Gobbo Ballista. So the issue with this model is that it comes crewed with Hobgoblins rather than the Chaos Dwarfs. This is an issue that can be tricky to rectify, but there are some options for it. The first is that you can print out a few more of the Infernal Guard, as we spoke about just a second ago, and just have them around the ballista. But they will have the wrong equipment because they are armed with arquebuses, or the Fireglaives in this instance. So in my opinion, the best option is to use the Lost Worlds Merchants file to give you some unequipped Chaos Dwarfs. You may need to green stuff and convert a few of the arms as they are carrying what looks like money pouches, but you can make it work quite easily enough. The ballista file is €12 and the merchants themselves are 5 for a total of €17. And then finally, for the first list, we have the Magma Cannons. And for it, the best I could find was the goofy looking Magma Thrower from the Lost Kingdom again. It will give the cannon a unique look as it is on legs and it's walking around a little bit, but you cannot argue that it doesn't look as slightly goofy as it is. And again, the file for this model is €10. Nice and easy, and that wraps up the first list, and we're up to a total €71. If you do decide to go for this idea, then just remember that you will have to convert it at the rate of the day of purchase. So those €71 will change a little bit into pounds. And more importantly, you will need to find a printer for the files themselves. And that will increase the measly €71 substantially. But there are plenty of people out there who will print it for you, and their prices can fluctuate greatly. So just keep that in mind. And so next, I'm going to move on to the 2,000 point list. Again, I have a Sorcerer Prophet, level 4 on the Law of Metal, with a Dispel Scroll, the Enchanted Shield, and a Talisman of Preservation this time round. Next is the same Hobgoblin Khan with a Charm Shield, Spear, and Light Armour on his Giant Wolf, but this time he's brought a mate with him, which is another Hobgoblin Khan on a Wolf, with the Shield of Patolos this time, Light Armour, and a Spear. And we have the same Infernal Castellan, who's our BSB, with the Mask of the Furnace, Warrior Bane, and a Shield. And for our last hero of this time around, we have a level 1 Demon Smith on the Law of Fire with the Ruby Ring of Ruin and the Dragon Bane gem for some chaff clearance. In core, we have our 20 Infernal Guard with full command, Fireglaives, and Naptha bombs on the Death Mask. And supporting this time around is 26 Hobgoblin Cutthroats with full command and nothing else. Again, in our special slot, we have the 2 Deathshrieker rocket launchers from the previous list, but only 1 Magma Cannon this time round. But that was in order to make room for the Kadai Destroyer in our rare section. So what do you need to add to this list over the first? Well, we've already got the vast majority of it. All we need is another Hobgoblin Khan on Giant Wolf, a Demon Smith, the Hobgoblin Cutthroats, and the Kadai Destroyer. Second Hobgoblin Khan model is easy enough, as you have the file to print 5 separate step riders from the first list. So easy enough, just print yourself off a second one in a different pose, and you have your second Hobgoblin Khan. So we'll move into the brand new stuff first. So for the Demon Smith, Lost Kingdom provides a file for the Magmorin Sorcerer, who just looks really ace for the Fire Wizard. He has what looks like magical fire coming out of his hands and looks really dynamic as he's striding towards the enemy. Again, he doesn't have a shirt on like the BSB model from before, but if you feel up to green stuff in some chainmail on him, then go for it, but it's not particularly necessary. And for him, he is €4 for the file itself. So, for the Hobgoblin Cutthroats, we're going to move away from the Lost Kingdoms for this one and back into familiar territory with Games Workshop. They have produced the Hobgrot Slitters models, and I can tell you from personal ownership of the models that they work incredibly well as Hobgoblins, as they are just the right size for the job, and even better, they're not direct only. So we can get them for a cheaper price. Swords and Swords Hobbies in Derby do them for £28.35 for 20. So we're going to need 2 boxes of them for a total of £56.70. And the last edition is the one and only monster of the show, the Kadai Destroyer, which of course is the infamous monster of the Chaos Dwarfs. So for this guy, we have a couple of options to go with. If you want to continue going down the printing route, Lost Kingdom makes a file for the Magmorin Devastator, which is a giant mechanical ball, and it looks really cool and thematic. And just from the pictures on the screen, it does look pretty awesome. And the file for the model itself costs €17. The other route, and the one that I have taken in my own Chaos Dwarf army, is to use the Mauler Fiend kit from Games Workshop's Chaos Space Marine collection. Now, it is a little bit more pricey than the file, but it is not direct only from Games Workshop. So Boards and Swords do this kit at a price of £42.75, which is a little saving there. Now, the Mauler Fiend does have a more mechanical head, which some people do find a little bit of an issue, but the head is easily swappable. For example, I have used the spare heads from some of my Gorgons from my Beastman collection, and they look perfect and goofy on him all the same. And that brings us to the end of our 2,000 point list. With those additions, and assuming that you've gone for the Games Workshop route for the Kadai Destroyer, your total will have gone up to €75 for the STL files and £99.45 for the Games Workshop models. So not bad for everything. And for the final list of today's video, yet again, we've got a Sorcerer Prophet, who's a level 4 on the Law of Metal, with a Dispel Scroll, an Enchanted Shield, and a Talisman of Preservation. Next is the same 4 heroes that we had as last time, with a Hobgoblin Khan, with a Charm Shield, Spear, and Light Armour on a Giant Wolf, with his mate, the other Hobgoblin Khan, on a Wolf with the Shield of Batolos, Light Armour, and a Spear. The same Infernal Castellan, who's our Battle Standard Bearer with the Mask of the Furnace, Warrior Bane, and a Shield. And again, our level 1 Demon Smith on the Law of Fire with the Ruby Ring of Ruin and the Dragon Bane Gem for some chaff clearance. In our core, our Infernal Guard have grown to 25 with full command Fireglaives and Naptha bombs on the Death Mask, with the supporting unit of Hobgoblin Cutthroats now up to 36 Hobgoblins with full command and nothing else. In our special slot, we again have our 2 Deathshrieker rocket launchers and the returning 2 Magma Cannons with our Kadai Destroyer in rare, now supported by a Hell Cannon. So again, there really isn't much to add to this list either, to be honest. Another few Infernal Guard, Hobgoblin Cutthroats, a second Magma Cannon, and the brand new Hell Cannon. With our Infernal Guard and Hobgoblin Cutthroats, you don't actually need to buy more stuff, as the file allows you to print off as many Infernal Guard as needed, and you have plenty of spare Hobgoblins to make the Hobgoblin unit the size it needs to be. The same applies for the Magma Cannon, as you already have 2 from the very first list. This just leaves the Hell Cannon, and for the last time we're going to use the Lost Kingdom and their monstrous Anzu Cannon. This thing is mad, and it suits the aesthetic perfectly. A friend of mine actually has one of these, and it works so well as a Hell Cannon when it's printed to the right size and painted up. It just looks fantastic, and it is a good centerpiece for any army. The file for this cannon is €16 itself, so not a bad price for it. And that's it. That's all you need to make the 2,000 point list I went through earlier into this 2,500 point list. So what would that all come to? Well, with the addition of the Hell Cannon STL, the euro price would rise to €91. That converted into pounds on the date of this recording is £76.89. And combined with the GW pricing, it is £176.34 in total. Again, I must stress that the Lost Kingdom files are just the files, so you will have to source a 3D printer to make the physical models themselves. And this will hike the price up a chunk. But as said, there are plenty out there that can do it, so it's just a case of finding the best price for you. A small note of caution, however, is the bases. You will need to source these separately, as a lot of the models are supplied with incorrect base sizes or shapes for Warhammer Fantasy, or, if it's the file-wise, none at all. I found the best Games Workshop equivalent bases are from Tiny Worlds Wargaming. They all come with a slot on the underside of the base to make magnetising them really simple. And they also sell magnets and movement trays, so you can get everything you need in one place. At £3.99 for 20 20mm square bases, or £14.99 for 100 20mm square bases, and for 2 or 5 100 by 50mm bases, and 10 or 25 cavalry bases respectively. So that is £3.99 for the smaller amounts and £14.99 for the larger amounts. You will need at least 6 of the larger bases, as the Kadai and the Hell Cannon need to be on bases. The Hell Cannon especially, as it was supplied with the base in its latter years of being sold by Games Workshop. And the Kadai is, you get told what size base needs to be on in the Tile Mechanic book itself. But either way, they're really good value for money, and to base all the models you'll need for these 3 armies, it will just cost you £27.93, as you will need 64 20mm square bases, 3 cavalry bases, and 6 100 by 50mm bases, putting the grand total up to £204 and 27 pence. And again, this is without finding a printer to print the files for you. So what competitive options can you add to the final list then? There is not much really, as the Chaos Dwarfs can be really lacking in unit variety department, and as such you end up with everything you want in one army to begin with. The only thing really is the Bull Centaur Torok, who is actually a really good hero, but you need to take a unit of Bull Centaurs forward to take the guy in the first place, which is not always the best option if I'm honest. The Bull Centaurs themselves can be a bit lacking, but for the fact you get to take the Torok in as well as them, makes it kind of worth it in some circumstances. Another thing I want to mention is that you don't have to go down the full printing method here for the army. There are other companies out there that do make the models themselves. Obviously, it won't be as cheap as just buying the files and finding a printer for yourself. But if you don't like the idea of 3D printing, there are other options for yourself. The main one that I can think of being Mantic Games. So, I hope today's snippet has helped you understand what we believe are the best choices for a competitive Chaos Dwarf army, and hopefully it's shown you little ways to save a bit of money too. If you've got any suggestions you think we missed, or if you want to know what we would use for certain units that are no longer available from Games Workshop, head over to any of our socials at Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, or email us directly, all the links for which are below, and we'll do our best to help you out. Join us next time for another installment in our Buying for Beginners series, where we'll look at one of the other armies of the Warhammer world, or head back to the Night of the Realm mustering ground, where you can find links to all of our other exclusive content.
Remember to tag your friends and like, subscribe and share. Then head over to triplecrownwargaming.com and become a Knight of the Realm today.
What are you doing, mate?
You alright?